we are going to our three panelists here. So we will start with Dr. Tom Millis. He is a senior lecturer at Aston University and former chair of the UK Media Reform Coalition, MRC. So let's start with a question. Do you think media has the power, or other people are in power to control the media?
Yeah, that's a big question. That's a great question. It sets me up for what I want to talk about.
You can answer in 1 minute, and then you have 10 minutes, because we are behind the schedule
I would
by
say
25 minutes.
The media can set the agendas to some extent, but generally it tends to be deferring to people in power and replicating that voice. But there's no simple question. There's a to and fro, and hopefully I can show that a little bit when it comes to the presentation.
All right. So Dr. Tom Millis is going to talk about media power networks and democratic governance, obstacles to and opportunities for media reform. So let's start.
Do I need to use the mic? Yes. Okay. Let me just have a little bit of water before I start.
I'll inform you in 2 minutes.
Super. Okay, thank you. Thanks so much for having me here today. I've really enjoyed listening to some of the challenges that you face in Kurdistan and some of the ambitions for media reform. I can only really talk with any authority from a UK perspective, and I want to pick up on some of the themes that we've already touched on in the previous session. Really, there were questions around the accountability of the BBC. Is it impartial? Questions around ownership, control, and particularly one thing that I was picking up on was the relationship between media and politics. And I want to talk about all of those things in the small amount of time that I have here today and present a piece of work with a couple of colleagues of mine who, like Des Friedman, are involved in the Media Reform Coalition. So Natalie Fenton, who leads the project, and Tom Chibbers, who's the vice chair of the Media Reform Coalition. I generally, when I'm talking about media at the Media Reform Coalition, we talk a lot about concentrations of ownership of the UK media and the political influence that the government has over the broadcasters, and particularly the BBC, which I wrote a book about. But today I don't want to talk about those issues, important as they are. I want to talk about something slightly different, a level of to and fro between the media institutions and politics, but also an affinity in terms of the types of people who are active in politics and the types of people who are the big decision makers in the media. So what we wanted to know, there's a sense in the UK and really around the world that the media doesn't represent the public interest, that actually it's the rich people who make decisions who are able to shape the agenda in the media. And you see this in polls, you see that a growing sense in qualitative research, this is Catherine Happer's edited collection that just came out from the Glasgow University Media Group, really declining levels of trust, even in the formerly very trusted media like the BBC. And there's a sense that the media doesn't represent well the interests of the general public. And I think from a media reform perspective, this phenomenon can be an impetus to media reform because more people recognise we need to do something about the media. But if this sense is correct, then it's also a block to media reform, because if the people in charge are closer to the political elite than they are to the public, contrary to everything the BBC may say, you get these very insular networks, which is difficult for us to influence. And that's certainly something we've experienced in the Media Reform Coalition. Right, just briefly, I was sort of approaching this from an elite studies perspective. I do research on the media, but also on elites with a quite strong UK focus. So elites is a very broadly used term. The people, generally the wealthy or powerful people in society. But the way we approached this was there's lots of existing work trying to figure out who are the influential people in finance, in big business, and some emerging work on civil society. Who are the real players there? Not actually a great deal on who are the real players in the media sector. So what we wanted to do was answer the question posed by the public. Are the media really this insular group, and are they so different to the public, and can we establish that with data? So basically, just briefly, why is the media important? It doesn't tend to be recognised by people who focus on elites, but it plays this really important role in terms of how elites from different sectors are able to negotiate, sometimes contest with each other, and obviously it's a channel for influence for the general public. What do? We start off by saying, how do we define elites? Well, basically people in positions of authority, so what's called a positional method, within institutions. So we start with the big media organizations and regulators in this country, and then we say, who are the people holding positions of authority? Now, actually, we shift that slightly because we want to say people also who have particular influence. So we have a combination in 2025 of all of these people, adding up to 683 people, executives, editors, senior news journalists, some columnists, and some high-profile current affairs presenters. And then what we do is we collect data on each of these people from various public sources to try and piece together who they are and what their career trajectory has been. So we know everything from their education up to 2025 when they were holding influential roles in the British media. Right. So I'm going to have to briefly give you some sort of sense, and this is still a work in progress, I should say, of what these people are like. So in the first row here, we have people who attended either private schools or a grammar school, a selective school, so you had to pass an exam to get in. And the first column is the general population of the UK. So basically 11% of people, 6% went to private school, 5% went to a selective school. We can think of these as like elite schools, right? I mean, I'm throwing the term elite around. So that is 11% of the population. And then we've got different sections here at the media, but I'll just focus on the combined. So this is everybody, that's 683 people. Almost half of them went to these elite schools compared to less than 10% of the UK population. This one is nuts. So Oxbridge, that's Oxford and Cambridge, the two most prestigious universities in the UK, attended by somewhere between 0.6 to 0.8% of the general population in Britain, attended by a whopping 43% of people in the media. In terms of like diversity, POC, people of colour, we said here, so we brought together anybody who's in any kind of ethnic minority, i.e. not white British, 18% of the general population, 10% of the media elite. So this gives you a sort of an overview of the kinds of people that they are. And what's important about this is every single study of the British elite has found that Oxbridge and private school are really important institutions for people to recognise people as being like each other. Okay. Then what do we do? Well, I have everyone's careers, right? So I pieced it together into 15 years and into 6-month chunks. So you can imagine if you think about what you were doing in the last 15 years and you divide that up, and then it will have the name of an organization you're working for. And when we do that for everybody, once you've done that, we use what's called sequence analysis to see how similar everyone's careers are to each other. I mean, this always sounds complicated, but it's actually relatively simple in principle. You've got a 6 months chunk. You want to make one person's career look like the other one's. How many pieces do you have to take out and put in order to make two careers identical to each other? Right? That's kind of the principle. And then, how similar is everybody in our entire data set to each other? Yeah? And then we can cluster them together. So at the bottom, everybody's an individual, and at the top, everyone's merged into one single chunk. So, and then we decide to cut it off. You can kind of see where the black lines start, into 21 different types of people, if you like. This is just a method we're using to try and explore how different these people are to each other. So then we get different groups. I'm just going to talk about a few of them because, as you can imagine, if you've got 21, there's quite a big subset of people. And we have different types of people, and now we've got the same sort of basic demographic data down the side here. The bottom, which I didn't show you before, I think, was Who's Who. So this is like the old school, prestigious publication that tells you someone's influential in British public life. People at The Guardian. So, okay, these are clusters. So these are people who spent most of their career at The Guardian. Doesn't mean you're currently at The Guardian, but that's the main sort of, we have to give these clusters names, look at them and figure out why you're in that particular cluster. And then we give them these names, Guardian lifers, BBC lifers. You can see how many people are in the group. 70% of the Guardian elites went to Oxbridge. So this is like the left of the British media.
Can I ask where you got those data from? not written.
The sources of the data. Yeah, it was. Sorry, that was a few slides back, but it was. So who's who, LinkedIn, Wikidata, LexisNexis, and a few other sources. So we sort of have a protocol for data collection. Yeah. Yeah, no problem. Can we go back one? Okay. So as you can see, we've got these different kinds of groups. The execs here, slightly less privately educated than everybody else. I kind of highlighted these unusual figures for you to sort of, and I know it's a lot for you to digest, but basically we find like a few patterns here. Like in the Daily Mail, like everybody's white, okay, in this cluster. And although loads of them went to Oxbridge, like way, way, way more than the British population generally, compared to the rest of the British elite, they're less like posh, if you see what I mean. So we see these different sort of clusters. They're slightly different to each other. The overall picture is they're very, very similar. Okay, I'll just finish up by talking about 2 minutes. Perfect. I'll just finish up by talking about media and politics, because I think like one of the things we really wanted to know was, is the media capable of performing that kind of gatekeeping function, or to what extent is it true that these people are sort of all in it together?